Lifestyle is essential for every age, every decade, and more so than ever in postmenopausal women.
Yeah.
Everything is on a timer in our body. 90% of all genes are either clock genes or related to clock genes.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go to bed at the right time, 6.5 minimum hours of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And, somewhere up to around 8.5 is like, you don't really need to get more than that. You want to eat no more than 3 times a day, preferably stop snacking,
Mm-hmm.
and try to eat earlier in the day. Try the later you eat in the day, the less insulin sensitive you are, the less your digestive tract works optimally. Try to make sure you hydrate. That's always underemphasized, how much hydration really matters. And avoid chemicals in your diet as much as possible. Try to eat clean, avoid processed foods, try to eat organic when possible.
Welcome to I Think I Can podcast. My name is Luella Young. I am a woman who believes that we, like wine, get better with age. Age brings us wisdom, intuition, and a level of sophistication that is beyond the reach of youth. I am here to tell you that living a luxuriously rich and fulfilling life is in your reach. I Think I Can podcast will teach you to think differently in order to get different results. Allow me to show you how to do life effortlessly. This podcast is for the woman who is tired of playing by the rules of society, community, religion, parents, and partners. I Think I Can is all about becoming brave, authentic, purposeful, and strong. Listen weekly and you will find yourself living a life you could have only once dreamed of. Thoughts drive our physiology, so channel your thoughts with me into a life truly worth living. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode on I Think I Can podcast. Today we have our repeat offender, Felice Gersh, who is, if you guys haven't listened to the other podcasts, episodes prior to today, she is a doubly board certified integrative physician and OBGYN. Is that correct, Felice?
That's it. Yep.
Okay, I
Those
nailed
are
it.
my
I
two.
was just going by memory. So, but today, and okay, so welcome, Felice.
So happy to be back.
Okay, we're going to talk about cardiovascular disease today in women. So, a very important topic that it's not discussed enough. And you would agree, right, Felice?
Well, yes, considering it's the number one cause of mortality, yes, I would say it
Wow.
deserves a fair amount of airtime. Absolutely. Women think often wrongly that they are immune to having heart attacks and strokes, but unfortunately, that is far from the case. Once they cross over into the menopausal years,
Mm.
the protective effects that they had in the earlier years from estrogen really dissipate as the years pass on.
And remind us again why estrogen is so protective. Like I know we spoke a lot about this through, when we had the discussions with PCOS, et cetera, but remind us again.
Well, it comes down to the fundamentals. So whether women want to reproduce or not reproduce, I love choice. Everyone should
Mhm.
decide what they want to do in life. But it's important to understand that the body itself is designed, the female body is designed for reproductive success. It's just like we are just primed by our genes. We're programmed. So, for example, human beings are diurnal, not nocturnal. In other words, we're programmed to function differently during the day and the night. And
Mhm.
female bodies are programmed genetically to be a certain way, and it's to optimize reproductive success so that the species perpetuates and so forth. Now, in order to reproduce successfully, you need to have a very healthy body. all aspects, every organ system, and they need to be working in a beautiful synchrony. So it turns out pregnancy is now viewed and should be as a huge stress test for women. Their bodies are really put through the ringer in terms of cardiovascular challenges. The blood volume in the female body about doubles during pregnancy. So you can imagine the energy output that's necessary by the heart. And we need to have healthy blood vessels. You need to have, a brain that works very well, neurological system, and an amazing, just an amazing complex immune system in order to deal with a foreign body growing in the body of the woman and not having the immune system destroy it. So the immune system goes through a whole series of modulations. And because all of these complexities occur in the female body, which do not occur in the male body, we have high amounts of this amazing hormone, estradiol, which is the version of estrogen, which is a family of hormones. Estrogen is not a hormone, it's a family of hormones. And the estrogen that's produced by the ovaries during the reproductive years is called estradiol. And estradiol is the master coordinator. I call it the master of metabolic homeostasis. It regulates every organ, every system, everything, so that the body works as a unified whole for the ultimate purpose of reproductive success. And in human females, reproductive success requires that the woman survive long enough to do the whole fertility pregnancy thing multiple times, to raise the children, to enable them to reach their sexual maturity so they can go through the whole process again. So that means human females have to live quite a long time. They need to, have multiple pregnancies. They have to be successful. They have to raise their children and so on. So estrogen in the form of estradiol controls all of that. And so when this is such a key, and it's a sad fact, but it is a fact that we need to deal with as females, that when reproductive capability ends with the development of menopause, which every woman in every ethnic background, every continent, every generation, every female human will go through menopause, assuming she gets to that age, which of course, fortunately, most of us do. And so menopause is universal, it's unavoidable, slightly delayable by a healthy lifestyle and genetics, but it will come sooner and usually, or later, but usually sooner. And during prime years of life, these are not like when you're like 90 years old. No, the average menopause, the normal range is considered 45 to 55. Those are key prime years of life. And when we lose our reproductive abilities, we lose our ovarian production of this vital life hormone called estradiol that controls all these other organ systems. So virtually every organ system will take a massive hit, a metabolic shift, like this gigantic change that occurs in the female body. And different women weather it differently. And I link it to always genetics. There's always a role in that. And also like I call it the health savings account. Like, what's your health status when you hit menopause? If it's been wonderful, then you'll be able to sail through the first couple of decades of menopause without too much in terms of consequence and symptoms. And you think you're in, great shape, not much has happened. And if you enter menopause and you're not healthy, you have a real hard time, much higher rates of hot flashes, night sweats, and an earlier onset of all of the disabilities and degenerative conditions associated with aging that I view as really related to deficiencies of hormones, and then ultimately downstream effects with energy production, nutrient status, and so on. So it's so important to be healthy long before you hit menopause so that you'll do better. But ultimately, every woman is going to have some serious issues relating to loss of estradiol. And in the majority of cases, it does involve something related to their cardiovascular status, because there are estrogen receptors everywhere in the cardiovascular system, throughout the heart itself, the myocardium, the muscle cells of the heart, the electrical conduction system of the heart. and the vascular system, so the arteries, the coronary arteries that feed the heart, and all blood vessels that go throughout the entire body are all regulated in large measure by estradiol. So there are many ways that cardiovascular and cardiometabolic, which all intersect, like because the creation of energy is what metabolism is all about, and also the regulation of energy, which is about glucose transport, fat
Mm-hmm.
metabolism. All of that is controlled by estradiol, the estrogen from the ovaries. So there are so many changes. Women notice it just in their body shape. They often
Mm.
notice it in their moods, their energy levels, and the hidden areas like high blood pressure. So, for example, by age 65, 75% of women are hypertensive. By age 75, 85% of women are hypertensive. And high blood pressure is not an early sign of vascular disease. By the time you have documented hypertension, it means that you have really significant vascular deterioration. And that's
Mm.
not a good thing. You're going to have reduced dilation, flexibility, the lining is less healthy, and all of this relates to estradiol status. So there are different things that we can talk about, well, the nitty-gritty of what estradiol does in terms of the mechanisms involved in the blood vessels and the heart and the whole autonomic nervous system, which controls, for example, heart rate variability, which is very
Mm.
important for overall health status, which we can actually measure, and also heart rate. Like, for example, after menopause, many women experience episodes of palpitations,
Mm-hmm.
arrhythmias, irregular heartbeats, and the incidence of atrial fibrillation, which is a
Mm-hmm.
really dangerous condition, can increase strokes, and actually it's now been associated with increase in dementia and heart failure. And women have very different uh, kind of status with their heart energy and have a different type of heart failure that they can get into. So there's so many different ways that women's cardiovascular system can be impacted. And many of these, until you have clinical manifestations,
Mm-hmm.
you really don't know these are happening. Like they talk about, like Alzheimer's, that the onset of the deterioration in the brain, which precedes the actual clinical manifestations of Alzheimer's, may take place decades before the
Mm-hmm.
actual clinical manifestations. And it's similar with the cardiovascular status. Things are happening that you don't even know about, but we can actually monitor and measure these through inflammatory marker tests in blood, in terms of blood testing. We can do echocardiograms and look at the energy status of the heart. You can do ultrasounds of blood vessels like the carotid and the leg
Mm-hmm.
arteries, the aorta, to look at the status of the vascular system. So there's a whole host of ways that we can do some measuring of what we might call the occult manifestations of the
Okay.
impact of menopause on the cardiovascular system. But it's a huge topic that, and there are workarounds. So I always want to, the way that I always look at everything is, if you're going to do something good, the first thing is to define the problems, or what you might call the impediments or the barriers to staying optimally healthy or achieving your goals, right? Whatever they may be, you have to look at the barriers, like what are you facing, what can block your path. And that's what I want to define so that people understand what they're up against when they get into menopause and the perimenopause. And then of course I don't want to leave it at that, because that's dismal. We don't want to like
Right,
say,
right.
and this is your fate and too bad for you. No, it's like, first you are honest about what you're facing, because
Mm-hmm.
hiding your head in the sand isn't going to help you, right? Denying reality isn't going to help you. So once you face the truth of what is really going to happen or is happening in a menopausal female, then we have viable, really efficacious therapeutic modalities. And it takes a lot of effort. Nothing is going to be easy, but obtaining and maintaining a really good state of health through what can be 50% of your life can be spent in menopause, right?
So
So half your life is in menopause. We want to make it a good half of your life.
Yes. So like I have a few questions here. One thing I just wanted to point out is like when you were talking about um how these are prime years of our life, like 45 to 55, for example. And it makes me think, because there's been so much research now and material written on longevity and all about how to promote on longevity and how we want to live our lives to the fullest and the longest. Yeah, you kind of have to wonder, like, I mean, like menopause, like that will never change. Like it's not like we're going to say, oh, let's just shift menopause. Well, then again, who knows?
We're not
not
talking
not
about decades from now, but we're talking about the foreseeable future.
right, like, yeah, exactly. But like it makes you wonder, right? Like I think, in our mother's time, or even prior to that, I mean, like longevity meant maybe closer to like 65, 70, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it kind of made like, and I remember my dad one time, quoting this: sometimes if you haven't made it in life by 40, you might as
You're
well,
done.
like, yeah, you're done, like,
Hang
like
up to your, hang it
in
up.
terms of your career. And like, but now I'm thinking like, okay, like I'm 54 and I really feel like I'm just taking off, and
Well,
it's sort of
yeah,
like,
it's
but
I
I
have
realize,
patients. Yeah, I
yeah,
have
I'm
patients in their 50s starting, master's degrees and
well,
PhD candidates. Oh,
exactly.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and having children at 45, I mean, with
Mhm.
IVF and all that stuff. I mean,
Right.
so there's a lot to think about here. And now, like what you mentioned about, like, before we get into, like, when I interrupted you, like you were going to get into more like, okay, the markers to look at, and you mentioned, it takes effort, and where do we all start, like with all this information that you've given us. I wanted to ask you one thing though, like, your heart rate variability is a very easy thing to look at, and I think
Mhm.
an important thing. But how about your resting heart rate? Is that something also indicative of your
Well,
health?
actually, it is. So
Okay.
we have this amazing neurological system that's called the autonomic nervous system. And this involves the different activities in the body that are neurologically regulated that we don't think about, like our heart rate, like our temperature, sweating, a peristalsis of the intestinal tract, contractions of the bladder,
Mm.
all these many, many functions of the body that are regulated. We don't say temperature go up, down, we
Right.
don't have to think about those things.
Yeah.
But it turns out that the autonomic nervous system is heavily regulated by estradiol. Isn't that, I
Mm.
mean, most people don't even have a clue about that. And the autonomic nervous system is very, very complex in how it interacts with the different organ systems and cells. And it has a very huge interaction, for example, with the immune system. So it's
Mm.
very interactive with these other systems of the body. And women in menopause have an upregulation of their sympathetic portion of their autonomic nervous system and downregulation of the parasympathetic. Now, it's like the Chinese got it so many centuries ago, thousands of years ago, the yin yang, like the balance.
Yes.
So they
Yeah.
always show in a lot of diagrams in medical journals, they have like a seesaw, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
everything's balanced, and then this thing goes up and this thing goes down, or the scales, this one goes up and this one goes down, to show that it's out of balance. That's why we always talk about balancing. It's a
Mm-hmm.
balancing act. And the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems are in this really very complex balance in different organ systems. And parasympathetic, you can think of in very simplistic, kind of a way of being sort of the calming effect,
Mm-hmm.
and the relaxing effect. And that the sympathetic is more like the stressor response that's
Mm-hmm.
associated with the stress response, and along the line with certain types of neurotransmitters and hormones, for example, like norepinephrine and epinephrine, which, like, and anyone who's ever like worked with someone who had like an asthma or an allergic reaction, anaphylaxis, they take out the EpiPen. You hear about that.
Mm-hmm.
And the EpiPen is epinephrine. And this particular type of hormone or neurotransmitter, there's always a lot of like interaction. What is it? Because they're all, amino acid chains, and it causes you to have a real raise in your heart rate. And so that's consider that part of like the stress response. It's the body's ability to fight this stressor, this anaphylaxis reaction. So what happens in women in the menopause is that they're always in sort of a stress state, and they have more cortisol output, they have more epinephrine, more norepinephrine, and they're more sympathetic. And that's not sympathetic like I have empathy. So that's not the meaning here. Sympathetic is sort of activation of sort of the stress response pathways and downregulation of the calming. And that causes a chronically elevated pulse.
And that's it's simply from lower estrogen. It's simply from the lower estradiol. Okay, so we wow, great. We step into menopause and we're chronically stressed.
That's right. That's why it is so important to recognize this. And the thing about the autonomic nervous system is that although it's always, we say autonomic is automatic, we don't really think about it. But now we know that we actually have this amazing, I'll call it the back doorway into regulating it. And that's where doing biofeedback, which we do in my practice, different forms of meditation, mind-body medicine actually facilitates the ability to control the autonomic nervous system. And you can actually upregulate parasympathetic, downregulate sympathetic as well. Like we're doing there's a lot more research on doing stimulation to the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is like a big finger of the brain that comes down, and it actually has branches of nerves that go to every single organ system in the body, like the reproductive organs, the bladder, the skin, the heart, everything has branches. And then there are these things called ganglion. They're clusters of neurons that are called sympathetic ganglion. And when you activate or stimulate the vagus nerve, then we increase what's called vagal tone, which acts as a calming thing. And they're using that a lot in psychiatry, in pain, in all the pain syndromes, and so on. It's so because it's all interactive in these things. And that's one reason why women have significantly, especially postmenopausal women, like much higher rates, at least double the incidence compared to men, of mood disorders, of pain syndromes, of sleep problems.
Fibromyalgia.
Fibromyalgia is hugely related to the autonomic nervous system. And that's where there's now research looking at like stimulators of various sorts, external stimulators, internal implantables, mind-body medicine. So all these different ways to help stimulate more vagal output and parasympathetic to sort of balance the overriding sympathetic, to help women to have healthier bodies and better functioning and happier, calmer brains. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because the heart rate, if a woman has a baseline rapid, heart rate, then that is indicative of overstimulation of her sympathetic portion of her autonomic nervous system. And that is like a big red flag. Hey, lady, you are in a stress mode, whether you realize it or not, because your autonomic nervous system is too much on the balance of, too much sympathetic. So you need to do mind-body medicine, look into things like vagal tone and vagus nerve stimulation, and look into what else you can do in terms of, are you menopausal? Would you want to go on hormone therapy? And other backdoor ways that I call, the nature's gift to the female population, and that are phytoestrogens. All the plants that have these magical ingredients, these polyphenols that are in the phytoestrogen family, that can actually work to modulate the neurological system, as well as the gut and many other systems of the body, the vascular system, to actually improve dramatically health. In fact, there was a study not too long ago that was the chief investigator was Dr. Neil Bernard, and he is a vegan cardiologist. And his study was eating a cup of soy a day and a plant-based diet, a very,
Mm-hmm.
a vegan diet,
Yeah,
which was,
let's just be honest.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's very, very vegan. Okay.
Yes.
And it is, but I like to think that everyone should be, I labeled it vegan light, so you're
Mm,
primarily vegan, but you have a little bit of healthy animal, but he's
mhm,
100% vegan. And his
mhm,
study was 100% vegan. It was for 12 weeks. Okay. It was
mhm,
not very long, but in 12 weeks time, eating tons of vegetables, all kinds of plants,
mhm,
and having an extra cup of soy every day, virtually close to 100% of the women who had very significant night sweats and hot flashes, which is a sign of autonomic nervous system dysregulation,
mhm.
their hot flashes and night sweats dramatically decreased, dramatically in just 12 weeks on this high phytoestrogen plant-based diet, because all plants have phytoestrogens. It's a question of which type and how much. And that's why eating a plant-based diet, they had, for example, a study of women who had rheumatoid arthritis, which is very prevalent in
Mhm,
postmenopausal women. That's
mhm,
the majority of women who have rheumatoid arthritis. And in the study, it was a comparable type of thing where they gave them a high plant based diet, tons of vegetables. And once again, in like 3 months, their pain levels dropped by over 50%. I mean, and there are drugs that are trying to do that with all kinds of side effects. And
yeah.
this is the backdoor way in, is by
Mhm,
eating these plants that have phytoestrogens. And of course, they don't only have phytoestrogens, they have high amounts of different kinds of fiber, which feed the gut
mhm.
microbial population. They have antioxidants and other nutrients, so vitamins and minerals. So it's a whole host of things. That's why it's
Right.
always magic in real food. And I use targeted supplementation, of course,
Mhm.
as an integrative physician, but I always start with fundamentals, which is your food. And of
Yeah.
course, all the other things that go into lifestyle, which are so critically important at every stage of life, but more so than ever in
Mhm,
menopausal women, to help them have, like you said, healthy longevity. Because women
mhm.
tend to live a little longer than men, but they live with more chronic disease than men do.
Yeah.
They have 80% of osteoporotic fractures are female. Joint replacements because of osteoarthritis, significantly more in women. Once women hit 65, getting back to cardiovascular, once women hit 65, I call it the halo effect from hormones, from the estrogen. That halo is gone. It's like
Mm.
afterglow, it's gone by the time you reach 65. And by age 65, as I mentioned, 75% of women have high blood pressure by the time they get to 65. And at age 65, women surpass men in the incidence of strokes and ruptured
Oh.
aneurysms. They surpass men. So you can't, women, stop thinking that you're home free, that you're somehow protected. You are not. And women, when they do get heart attacks, they're quite different from male heart attacks. We are so
Mhm.
different in so many ways. Women die more from their first heart attacks than men do.
Mm.
And women have a different type of heart failure entry that's called, it's related to what's called mild, it starts with mild diastolic dysfunction.
Mm.
So it's where the heart actually becomes stiffer and it
Mm.
relaxes. You can see it on an echocardiogram, like the heart is beating and the heart, like, it contracts and empties, it
Mhm.
relaxes and fills. And that relaxing filling part is, you can see it on an echocardiogram, ultrasound of the heart. The
Mm.
heart is actually stiffer. So instead of being smooth, it's stiffer because it
Mm.
has insufficient energy. Because the
Mm.
female heart, because it has to pump about twice the blood volume during pregnancy, it has, like extra special energy needs. And that mitochondrial machine is
Mhm.
maintained by estradiol. And without adequate estradiol in the heart, which of course is going to be universal after menopause, particularly if you don't give estrogen as a replacement hormone, you have energy deficiency in the heart. And this is evident as mild diastolic dysfunction. That's where it starts, because the mitochondria, because they need estradiol to function in order to create energy through
Mhm.
the like electron transport chain, what we call oxidative phosphorylation. You need estradiol. And then as a metabolic byproduct of creation of energy, in mitochondria, there's a little product that's called superoxide that's formed,
Yeah.
a waste product of the mitochondria. And this
Mm,
is not capable of diffusing out of the mitochondria. It's stuck in the mitochondria. And
mm,
it's like one of the most toxic things on the planet,
mm,
superoxide, two oxygens together.
yeah.
And the way that it's broken down to get rid of it, not poison and destroy the mitochondria, is through the action of an enzyme that's called superoxide dismutase.
Nutrients.
And
Yeah.
that enzyme is activated by estradiol. You need to have estradiol for that enzyme to work properly.
And
And
is
it's
isn't
amazing.
it also through some fruits? Is it broccoli that I
Well,
thought I
you
thought
need, so the mineral that's part of superoxide dismutase is manganese.
oh,
So you
right.
need to have manganese. So you need to have the diet. And like broccoli has in it all kinds of special
Yeah.
molecules. Like one is sulforaphane, which is
Yes.
essential for the entire detoxification pathways in the liver.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, I mean, definitely the cruciferous vegetables are magical in their ability to help with detoxification, so you don't bioaccumulate other toxins. And this is like the toxin of the mitochondria, and then we have all the other waste products that all the cells are producing that we have to get rid of, or they bioaccumulate and poison ourselves, like from within, endogenous poisoning.
Yeah.
But with estradiol, we're able to actually work on all of these pathways and
Mm.
maintain proper mitochondrial function, not just in the heart, but also how about in the brain and
Yeah.
elsewhere,
Oh.
because you need to have functioning mitochondria to create energy. In fact, some people talk about aging in terms of mitochondria. They talk about the mitochondrial theory of aging. When your
Mm.
mitochondria, the energy producing factories of cells, when they become dysfunctional, then that's when you have real onset of aging processes in the body. Well, I mean, there's many ways to look at aging. I look at it as a series of deficiencies, and
Mm-hmm.
then, of course, having all kinds of downstream effects throughout the body and in every cell, in every organ system, in every little organelle of the cell,
Mm-hmm.
including the mitochondria. And so there's so many different functions that every cell needs to have in order to stay healthy. And estradiol has a role in every one of them, I can tell you. So that's why it's like universal that there are so many issues after menopause. Women are more prone to certain autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid
Mm-hmm.
arthritis,
Mm-hmm.
fibromyalgia, brain fog, dementia, and of course, the osteoarthritis and osteoporosis, and all of those actually link amazingly with cardiovascular disease. There's this huge like web of interconnectivity in the body, and that's where like the neurological system, like you brought up with like heart rate, is actually regulated through this neurological system.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have the proper estradiol and you get this regulation of your autonomic nervous system, then you're more prone to such things as arrhythmias and atrial fibrillation. And it's relatively rare, but it's actually increasing in its prevalence. And that's a condition that the familial or friendly name, the common name is broken heart syndrome. And the other name is Takotsubo syndrome, which is a type of, it's like a heart attack slash muscle catastrophe. And it's due to autonomic nervous system dysregulation, where you have a massive pulse of sympathetic output that causes the muscle of the heart, the myocardial muscle cells, to actually become sort of paralyzed suddenly. And then you have like, it's like a heart attack, and it can kill women. And, it's just an amazing thing. And it's talked about as being triggered by like a series of emotional impacts or a huge emotional
Wow.
impact. But the reality is that yes and no. Yes, if a woman has a sudden shock, to her, like
Yeah.
emotional status, someone she loves is killed, or some
Yeah.
horrible thing happens at work, or, her, husband suddenly leaves her, or something terrible
Right.
happens, that could be a triggering event, or it could just be life. But really, it's not well recognized and talked about that
Mm-hmm.
underlying broken heart syndrome, and that name
Mm-hmm.
kind of says a lot about how it's viewed, is really an autonomic dysregulation that's related to estradiol deficiency. And almost all of this broken heart syndrome, these events occur in postmenopausal women. And it's not because postmenopausal women have more emotional, things happen. It's because they don't have estradiol. And yet the cardiologists don't get it. It's like really frustrating.
Yeah.
Papers are written and they leave out anything about estrogen. It's like the strangest thing ever. They say it happens mostly in women, and then they kind of leave it at because women are just more emotional, you
Yeah.
know, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, yes. Sorry. Excuse us, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. Instead of blaming the women for
Yeah.
being emotional.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to I think, whatever years and years ago about women being in delirium, right? Like I mean
Mhm.
all that too. It's just sort of men tend to just die, but women, go into some sort of delirium or psychosis, and it's blamed on the women, sort of thing. But it's really, as you say, it's a lot of it has to do with estrogen and
It
estradiol.
does. And that's where the word hysterical came from,
Oh, right, right.
His,
Yeah.
Hyster from the uterus, that women are hysterical. But the
Jeez.
reality is that I like to embrace the differences between males and females and embrace my femaleness. And the
Hmm.
fact is, this is a fact, women do have more robust immune systems. We are more prone to creating inflammatory responses, which can save us in an infection. We
Mm,
tend to survive infections, pandemics, sepsis during the
mm.
reproductive years better than men. We have this just amazingly very dynamic and more robust, really, immune system. We make
It-
antibodies more, we have more white blood cells, and our neurological system is heavily controlled by estradiol in so many ways. And yes, women do have a higher rate of anxiety and depression than men. Women have more sleep disorders, but women have many other, things that they're better at, so to speak, if you can call it.
right.
But I don't feel like being more like emotionally attuned to things. I don't think that is a negative. I
No,
I really don't.
no.
The fact that women may be more empathetic, they feel others' emotions better, they just are
Mm-hmm.
impacted by emotions more. That's
Hmm.
why is that a negative? I mean,
No.
that's why I hate that sort of the male dominance of the world kind of has
Mhm.
put a negativity on things that are not inherently bad at all. I think of them as inherently good, and it's
Well,
all how you frame things. It's totally how you frame things. And
exactly.
the fact that we have emotions and we cry at Hallmark commercials. Well, so what?
Yeah,
We
exactly.
feel emotions more,
It,
and that's okay. That's a good thing. I don't I'm not embarrassed to say that, I bring boxes of tissues or I stuff them in my pockets, for certain movies, or that even,
yeah,
like, crying at weddings. Like, so what? It's like we feel emotions more and we're proud of it.
right,
It's
right.
okay. It doesn't make us less competent. Our IQs are super high. We're very capable, but we don't
Yeah.
have to pretend to be men anymore. We are
No.
ourselves. And we have different hormones in different ratios. We have different challenges. Our cardiovascular system is different. For
Mhm.
example, when women do not have great benefit from having stents put in prophylactically at all. In the middle of a heart attack, sometimes it will help, depends on what the problem is, because women have more microvascular disease that is involved in heart attacks than men do. So when people die of a heart attack, acutely, they die of a heart attack. They're
Mhm.
not dying because the heart muscle is dying from lack of oxygen. That ultimately can lead to heart failure when that sort of thing happens. But people die from a heart attack because of heart arrhythmia, the
Mm.
rhythm of the heart. That's why when someone has a heart attack, they don't do anything but get out the defibrillator, right? Get the paddles, right? Because they go into ventricular fibrillation. That's where the ventricles of the heart that are involved in pumping the blood
Mhm.
out to the body, they're like quivering, like a little bowl of jelly. They
Mm.
quiver. So nothing, the blood isn't being pushed out. Okay. It's like
Mhm.
just like a quivering. The heart is like this, and it's not pumping, it's not doing
Yeah.
the pumping motion.
Yeah.
And that is possible to have happen, that you can go into ventricular fibrillation from just a tiny bit of deprivation of oxygen to some area of the heart, not because of the heart muscle dying, but because it triggers what? It triggers the autonomic nervous system's control of the rhythm of the heart to become dysregulated. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a rhythm problem, not a muscle problem that
Mm.
triggers death from a heart attack. And that's really important to know. And women tend to get, when they get heart attacks, and women have lots of heart attacks, okay?
Mm.
That's like the number one cause of death is coronary artery disease. And women have tons of strokes too. And the thing about it with the heart attack is that it tends to be from what we call microvascular. So the heart has big blood vessels. No, they're not big in sense, they're big like the aorta, but they're big,
Mm-hmm.
the big ones of the heart. And they are, like the anterior descending and the circumflex. Anyway, so they these big coronary arteries. And then there are some smaller branches. And those are the ones where they put stents in when they do the
Okay. Okay.
angiograms and they put in stents. Then in order to deliver oxygen to the actual cells of the heart, the
Mm-hmm.
blood vessels break into smaller and smaller blood vessels. They
Mm-hmm.
branch off into these little bitty, and then they go down into the capillaries. Well, in men, most heart attacks occur because of an acute blockage from a ruptured plaque,
Mm.
and then the plaque ruptures due to inflammation, and a little blood clot, like a scab, forms inside the artery where the blood is flowing. That little scab forms, and if it breaks off, it can go downstream. And although it would ultimately dissolve, right then it might as well be a rock because it's not
Mm.
dissolving at that moment, and it actually will block a blood vessel downstream where the caliber of the blood vessel is smaller, and it gets stuck. And it typically gets stuck where there's a lot of buildup of plaque and the artery has more stenosis, so it's more blocked. So because it's
Mm-hmm.
a narrower passage. So where you have a tremendous amount of plaque blocking the artery, but not completely, just blocking a lot of the flow, that isn't really the area that ruptures. Usually it's somewhere where there's much less plaque, but it's unstable plaque. But the
Mm.
blood clot gets stuck where there's that narrowing. That's typically male. That's not typically the female. The female's mode of having a heart attack is a tiny little vessels get blocked, usually due to spasm, more as like half the time from spasming of the vessel shutting, and or sometimes from a little ruptured plaque. But it's the small little bitty blood vessels. You can't put stents in them. They're little bitty vessels, okay? You can't run a stent into those. And that triggers the arrhythmia. So it's a small area that's actually deprived of oxygen, but it triggers this really big effect on the conduction system of the heart, the electrical system that keeps the heart beat properly going. And they
Mm-hmm.
go into the ventricular fibrillation that is the killer arrhythmia. And so it's really important to know these differences because they're treated differently and the causations can be actually quite different. In fact, after women have a heart attack and they survive, which is not everyone, but the
Yeah.
survivors, and then they do angiograms, they find that fully half of them don't have any significant plaque at all. So it's like we have to just recognize cardiovascular disease in women is different, and it does involve a lot of the neurological system. It involves hormonal systems and immune systems. And we
Mm.
need to realize that if anything is important in a woman's postmenopausal health, and of course, the vast majority of cardiovascular events occur post-menopause. Now, unfortunately, there's more things happening to younger women. This is shocking, but there's a higher rate of things like strokes and heart attacks in younger women. And
Mm.
that's heavily related to endocrine disruptors, chemicals, both
Mm.
pharmaceuticals and in our environment that actually block the actual normal function of estradiol. We live in a world of plastics, flame retardants, pesticides, all of the heavy metals can block the normal function of estradiol and promote metabolic dysfunction and obesity because they affect the ability to burn fat and all the things that I mentioned that estradiol controls in terms of creation, distribution, utilization of energy, both for fat and glucose, our energy sources. All of that is regulated through estradiol, and chemicals can interfere with that in our lives
Mm-hmm.
and increase the risk of pregnancy-related complications and also early age, like premenopausal heart attacks and strokes, and other immune-related dysfunctions like breast cancer occurs
Mm-hmm.
in younger women more now than in previous generations because of these ubiquitous endocrine disruptors that kids are exposed to, like young teens and such. And then years later, it sets the stage for breast cancer and so on, and also cardiovascular disease. There's now data, published data, that young girls who are in their teens who start on oral contraceptives have a higher lifetime risk of cardiovascular events
Yeah.
because, I mean, it is what it is. Birth control pills are not human hormones. They're technically endocrine disruptors, and they do actually set the stage, like any other unfortunate chemical that doesn't really belong in the human body, to increasing the risk later down the line of having cardiovascular disease and events.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
cervical cancer. So we have to be aware that there are things that we put into our bodies intentionally in terms of
Mm-hmm.
trying to block fertility. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, fertility is actually a vital sign of female health, and male health too, right? So,
Right.
like young people who are infertile, that's a red flag. Something's wrong with them. But we're
Exactly.
actually
Yeah.
putting chemicals into their bodies to make them infertile, and don't think that that doesn't have both short and long-term ramifications. Of course it does. Everything does. If I
Yes.
told you to lick a plastic cup every day as your contraceptives, you look at me cross-eyed, right? But what if we're actually doing a comparable, you know?
Right.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of weird, but it is, I call a spade a spade.
Well, I feel like we're getting towards the end here, and I really want to give the women out there some hope after.
Absolutely.
So let's speak on like you've I've like if you see my piece of paper here, I've jotted down so many things, and I'll try to let's take the postmenopausal woman,
Mhm.
and can you remind me um is it like I seem to have read or heard that once you passed X number of years, like past menopause, you no longer are a candidate for bioidentical
Well,
hormone?
well, as a baseline, let me just quick do a run through.
Okay.
And so lifestyle is essential for every age, every decade, and more so than ever in postmenopausal women. So women after menopause, because estradiol actually regulates the circadian clock. So you
Yes,
live like a life of jet lag, which has many cardiometabolic and emotional
exactly. I'm glad
effects.
you brought that up
So
because
yeah,
even
so it's
even when
so
we're
important.
like ridding the plaque, even right, like the good REM,
Everything.
like everything. Yeah.
Everything is on a timer in our body. 90% of all genes are either clock genes or related to clock genes.
Hmm.
So you have to go to bed at the right time, preferably between 10 and 11 every night. Try to get at least, well, 6.5 minimum hours of sleep.
Hmm.
And, somewhere up to around 8.5 is like, you don't really need to get more than that.
Hmm.
And then, you want to sleep in a cool, dark room. You want to eat no more than 3 times a day, preferably. Stop snacking
Hmm.
and try to eat like earlier in the day. Try the later you eat in the day, the less insulin sensitive you are, the less your digestive tract works optimally. So
Yeah.
eat more of your food in the first half of the day. Try not to snack. Try to make sure you hydrate. That's always underemphasized how much hydration really matters. And avoid chemicals in your diet as much as possible. Try to eat clean, avoid processed foods, try to eat organic when possible. Try
Hmm.
to eat what I say, like vegan light, mostly plants and just a little bit of animal, like no more than about 3 ounces a day of animal. And the rest, you get plenty of protein from beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, and all of that. You
Well,
can get plenty.
soy. I was going to
Soy
ask you
is a bean.
about the soy. Like, I mean, so what is the best source of quality soy if we're going to
Oh,
start
and
incorporating?
so you want to have soy in your diet unless you have an allergy, which you can
Yeah.
have allergy to anything. But whole organic soy, it should never be GMO because it's full of chemicals.
Right.
So soy, you got to watch out for. It really has to be organic. And the forms that are the least processed would be tofu, miso, tempeh, and the beans themselves, edamame. And that's
Okay.
it. So not soy pretending to be a hot dog or a
Yeah.
burger or turkey, bacon, or some other weirdo thing.
Mm-hmm.
So just soy in itself, okay, and enjoy
Mm-hmm.
it. And but there are phytoestrogens, as I mentioned, like in soy, it's isoflavones, and flax seeds and other seeds and nuts.
Mm-hmm.
There are often lignans in red grapes. It's resveratrol, and
Mm-hmm.
coming down from like pomegranates or ellagic acid and urolithins. So, all plants have some form of phytoestrogen. Many people don't realize they actually are phytoestrogens. A lot of the
Mm-hmm.
polyphenols that people admire and think are so good, they're actually phytoestrogens. So that's why you want to eat a lot of plants. And then you want to exercise. Fitness is a vital sign. And exercise, the goal, the minimum goal is 30 minutes of aerobic exercise 5 days a week,
Mm-hmm.
moderate intensity, and 3 days of resistance training for musculoskeletal health and cardiovascular health. And then you want to have a mind body practice, whether it's guided imagery, meditation, biofeedback,
Mm-hmm.
progressive relaxation, prayer, meditation, something. You need to actually do it every day. You need to
Yeah.
water and chemical toxicant exposures, air purifier, water purifier, cleaning
Mm-hmm.
solutions. Don't use toxic cleaning solutions. It's amazing what vinegar can do. It's amazing what lemon oil can do, and
Mm-hmm.
so on. And you can Google, organic cleaning products, and there's a big market now. There, you can get
Yeah.
commercial products. You can make your own for pennies, or you can buy them for many dollars. But
Right.
use them, okay? Because the chemicals in many cleaning solutions are so harmful. The fumes are so harmful.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to do all of these really important lifestyle habit type
Mm-hmm.
things. And then I'm a big advocate for hormone therapy. And you mentioned like the timing hypothesis.
Yeah.
So this came out of the Women's Health Initiative, which is a whole story in itself, a study done 20 years ago, not using human hormones, using conjugated equine estrogens that's from pregnant horses' urine, that's not ever found in a human being. And even the horse is trying to get rid of it. And then medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is known as a progestin, has been found to be actually carcinogenic, increases
Mm-hmm.
breast cancer risk, strokes, heart attacks. It's really an unhealthy anti-progesterone, I would call it. It's a progesterone endocrine disruptor, and it's not healthy. And that's what they included in that study. And what they found, because they were utilizing much older women than found in a usual menopausal study, because they didn't want them to have any symptoms of menopause at all, because they knew that people would be unblinded as to which group they're in. Of course, they all figured out because they had breast tenderness or bleeding. I mean, they all figured out what group they were in anyway. They're supposed to be blinded. You didn't know what you were getting, placebo or the real pretend human hormones, but everyone figured it out anyway because they had symptoms. But they tried not to use women who had night sweats or hot flashes because they would figure it out. So they used older women. The average age was in the early 60s. And what they found was that there was an increase in strokes and dementia in those women. And so they came up with this timing hypothesis, because the young women in their 50s who were in that study, which only made up 10% of the study subjects, actually did quite well. And they did not have the problems that the older women's had. The older women suffered. But the bottom line is, there was another study, which was not ideal either, didn't use the right hormones or the right doses, but at least it didn't use medroxyprogesterone acetate. In that study, called the ELITE study, they found that when they studied women who were 10 or more years out from their last period, that they had no harm. There was no harm. They didn't actually show benefit in the
Mm-hmm.
the carotid artery rather, but they didn't show any harm. And there's other data showing, like, for example, when you use hormones in the vagina at any age, you could be in the 70s and it still benefits the vagina. So the vagina isn't unique, like the unique structure of the human body. It
Mm-hmm.
has hormone receptors and it can get better. So my personal belief, based on vaginal, we'll call it rejuvenation with
Yeah.
estrogen therapy and other studies, and the ELITE study showing no harm, is that you can give hormones to women at any age as long as they're properly dosed and bioidentical. And but the mainstream does not agree with that. So I have to say I'm an outlier in my
Mm-hmm.
statements to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the general mainstream is to give still the smallest dose for the shortest period and only to women within 10 years of their last period.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that that is actually misguided. I feel that you should give the most effective dose, not the lowest dose. Why would we give the lowest dose of anything? We want the most effective dose. And
Yeah.
that would be a physiologic dose, to achieve a physiologic level. I mean, if you're giving hormones, you want to get levels that are going to be comparable to the level of a healthy woman, not the level of an unhealthy woman. That's kind of bizarre thinking. And then you want to give it for life, because why would you ever want to start degenerating and having the harms of estrogen deficiency status?
Yeah.
And as well, you want to monitor, because you want to know, because every woman is unique in how she absorbs estrogen products through her skin. It's not
Mm.
like the skin was designed or expected to be for that purpose. So the absorptions are, issue is quite variable. So you have to monitor women and see what levels they actually achieve with the dose that you're giving, because it is
Mm-hmm.
going to be high. This is the art of medicine. I'm telling you, the giving hormones in menopause is really a true art, because you really have to treat each woman as very unique, and her metabolism, her absorption is going to be unique to her. So you really have to look at each woman individually. But I'm a believer in giving hormones throughout the life of a woman, starting them
Mm-hmm.
at whatever stage you're at, recognizing earlier is always better, because we're giving hormones primarily for prevention, and it's not giving hormones to a woman who has advanced disease or end stage disease. It's not going to turn the clock back. So if you have massive vascular disease, hypertension, end stage renal disease, end
Yeah.
stage dementia, I mean, giving hormones is not going to reverse
No.
everything. I mean, let's be
No.
practical and
Yeah.
realistic about it. So starting younger is so much better than starting older, because I can't fix things that are really in terrible status state. I just
Yeah.
can't. I don't have that power. But
Mm-hmm.
but you can still do better.
Right.
Better is you just have to, wherever you are in life, whatever stage, we can do better. The best
Mm-hmm.
is to start early. The best is to be healthy preconceptually, right? To
Right.
have your mom have good healthy eggs to begin with, and your dad have good healthy sperm to create the best embryo. Everything starts from
Mm-hmm.
scratch. We
Mm-hmm.
know that more and more, in the environment within the uterus matters for the metabolic status of that child for the rest of his or her life. So what
Yes.
happens in pregnancy is not insignificant. It's huge. It really sets how everything is developed metabolically, hormonally, endocrine, neurologically, everything in that little new person that's being created. So that environment is critically important. And then every stage of life, to optimize health and put health as a priority. Every stage. You can't be
Everything.
healthy for the rest of your life if you end up being unhealthy when you hit menopause. I'm telling you, you can always do better, but you could have
Yeah.
done better if you started out doing better things earlier in life. But we have to meet everyone where they're at. Wherever they are, we can do better. With lifestyle and hormones, we can really help women to avoid having a premature death from stroke and heart attack. We can do so
Mm-hmm.
much, but we need to
Mm-hmm.
recognize the risk and then take
Mm-hmm.
all the appropriate, efficacious actions.
Perfect. And so I just want to top this off by mentioning too, as a therapist, like the self-flagellation is not helping either, right? So like I don't want anybody to leave this this episode thinking, oh my gosh, like I've been doing it all wrong, or I don't know where to begin, sort of thing. I mean, self-love, self-compassion towards
Right.
yourself is so important. um and like one thing too, I just wanted you to comment on when it comes to vagal tone. And to be honest, I've always kind of had troubles with that term, because to me tone means like a toned body, like tight, right? But no, vagal tone is good. And there's
Yes.
some natural, like, or like things that you can do, like as soon as you're finished listening to this episode. And one is gargling, right? Gargling. Or and
Well, I mean, there are certain things that, like what I like to say as a regular kind of a practice,
yeah,
is breath work. I mean, there's like,
yes.
oh my gosh. So, like, let me teach really fast. This is what I learned in my fellowship, and it's very commonly talked about. You use your nose to breathe in deeply,
Mm-hmm.
like fill all your lungs for
Mm-hmm.
4 seconds. So deep in through your lungs, through your nose,
Mm-hmm.
4 seconds. Then hold it for 8 seconds and then breathe out slowly for 7
Mm-hmm.
through your mouth with a whooshy
Mm-hmm.
sound. If you can't quite hold it for 8, hold it for 7 and then breathe out for 8. But you
Yep.
want to breathe in for 4, hold for 7 or 8, then breathe out for 7 or 8 through your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And you will feel this like calming, like so calming, that is going to change things. I mean, people have tried, like gargling, coughing, but on a regular, I
On
mean,
a regular
basis.
basis. Yeah.
Right. And then
Yeah.
probably a lot of the benefit from acupuncture is actually
Mm.
through the autonomic nervous system, through triggering, with the needles, different nerve pathways. So it's really, really interesting. And a lot of
Mm.
people find exercise to be quite, calming. So that's another thing. Of course, yoga has a lot of calming effect. And then they add in at the end the yoga breathing.
Yeah.
Visualizations can be, I find listening to certain kinds of music to just,
Absolutely.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it just like makes me feel happy inside and
Yes.
calmer just listening. And of course, on the opposite end, I find certain, they call it music, I think it sounds like noise. And I
Yeah.
find it really revving up my sympathetic nervous
Yeah.
system, like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
turn that off,
Yeah.
but, so find the music that you find is calming.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason they play spa music in spas, right? Find
Exactly.
what works for you. And then one of the things that I find is really also amazing as a calming is like if you put on like African beat music, like
Mm.
the drums beat,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just sort of bounce to it and you close your eyes and you just get into the beat. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing that's what they did. I mean, ancient peoples figured this out when they sat around the campfire and they would beat on the drums and people would like make these sort of monotonous sounds,
Yes.
repetitive, and then they would dance in like
Yeah.
little circles and just, I mean, they
Yeah.
were all activating their parasympathetic nervous system. It was
Absolutely.
living in those tribes. It was a stressful life. Let's not, romanticize ancient people's lives. They were challenging and
Right.
they figured things out and they didn't, take, you know, tranquilizers,
Mm-hmm.
which have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
negative effects. We won't get into that. We can talk about that another day. Some of the negatives of the pharmaceuticals that are designed to
Yeah.
try to improve life, they harm it. And absolutely, like, who in their life has done everything perfectly? Just let it go. We
Yeah.
all wish that we didn't eat Cheetos and mac and cheese from a box. I mean,
Right.
believe me,
Right.
I
Yeah.
get it. I get it. I get it. And so, learn from the past, but don't hover in it and don't berate yourself. Wherever you are, remember, we can do better.
Yes.
And
Always
nobody
better.
has ever hit best. Nobody. I see patients day in and day out. No one has no regrets about what they wish they could have done differently in life. We take off where we are right now because you know what? We live in the present and we look to the future. The past is past, right? So learn from
Yeah.
the past and let it go and let's do better so that we can live quality, wonderful lives because that's it. This is it for us. So let's make the best of it, make the best choices, and enjoy every moment of this beautiful gift called life.
Exactly. Bring yourself to things that bring you more joy, rather than that,
Absolutely.
just there's so many little ways and tiny little things that you can do every single day. Step into gratitude more. That's going to
Right.
shift your whole
Get in
automatic.
get
Yeah.
out in nature. They've shown just
Oh, yeah.
walking in nature is amazing. I mean, parks and green areas in
Yeah.
cities are so important. Even putting a nature painting on the wall inside and getting
Yeah.
sunlight. Sunlight is happy medicine. It increases serotonin and then melatonin. You sleep better. So get outside, see nature,
Mm.
get, even if you, put flower seeds
Yes.
plant a window box,
Yeah.
get some greenery, get some
Yeah.
life into your environment.
Yeah.
I see lovely plants in your place
Yes,
behind you.
absolutely.
Put some
Yeah.
greenery in and enjoy life, and your
Mhm.
menopausal years will be good ones.
Yeah, we could probably in the next hour, and I think you and I could probably list off like 158 things of little things that you can start doing
Yeah,
today. So
I'm
that's your
having some herbal tea. Right.
wonderful, and that's your job, guess, is for you to start listing your own reasons and ways. So go to work is really the answer here. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you guys are gonna hear back from Felice because as you can see, like the more I talk to her, the more I'm like, okay, well, let's plan our next episode because now I got a bunch of other questions. So
Well, it's
it's
endless and it's endless fun.
endless
So I look
fun.
forward to the next time.
Okay, thanks so much, and we'll see you soon. Bye
Bye. Have a good
bye.
day.
You too. Thanks once again for joining me on another great episode of I Think I Can podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe below so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And until next week, treat each day like it was your last because each new day is a privilege that we shan't take for granted. Cheers and have a great week. Bye bye.